Hello, Alex Lafkus here. I'm going to tie one of the bigger streamers I like to fish today. And the first step is 10mm shank. This is just for the wiggle tail. I actually have two flies that I tie this way, and I keep the back halves the same on both. One is the brush head Deceiver, and the other is the fish skull Deceiver, which I don't know, it's good. It's a really easy back half that gets me what I need, which is a little bit of length, a little bit of action, and they're really easy to bust out the back ends of them. So we call it a guide fly. Super simple, very effective, and I'm getting both done. So we're just adding a little bit of, Chinese strung, whatever. This is whiting rooster saddle that's off the back. And then I have another feather off a whiting rooster saddle. I'm just going to wrap at the front of the shank, give a little bump of color. Now, I'm using more schlappen and Chinese strung stuff now because the prices on these have gotten a little bit ridiculous. I remember years ago I ordered about 4 in every color I wanted, and I think I was charged $9 each. So as popularity has increased, prices increased, and now I'm just getting cheap and doing what I can with whatever schlappen and stuff I have laying around. But I am getting a little low on some of that stuff right now, so we're just going to try to burn out the rest of these feathers. But real simple, that's just the wiggle tail on the back. I do like putting that little bit of schlappen of the opposite color because it just gives it a little flair, mixing up those colors. Tying olive and yellow today. Olive and yellow is one of my staples. I would say between olive and white and olive and yellow, about 90% of the fish I catch in Arkansas are on those two colors. So I usually go, and I mean, obviously I carry some other stuff. I have some days where the chartreuse works. Brown and yellow is always good during pre-spawn or spawning time as browns are attacking other browns. But the olive and white and olive and yellow tend to be two of my better producers. I always have black, run black a lot in low light, straight olive, I have days on that. So, but I usually have my two colors I kind of start with, and that's what I'm going to focus on first. And if they aren't biting it, then I'll get creative. But usually at that point, it doesn't really matter. It's more about presentation. So then now I'm going to a size 1 B10S. So this is going to be a little bit bigger of a fly. That's why I'm using the size 1 as the back hook. A lot of times I'll do a 1 and a 2 if I'm trying to keep my fly a little bit smaller. But frankly, the majority of the length you get out of these flies is just from the length of your tails. I try to keep a lot of them in the 6, 7, maybe up to 8-inch range. You have a few years that I feel like they're really biting the 9 and 10 better, but that tends to be excessive high water, giant rivers if you're fishing those, any of the southern tailwaters, some of the western rivers, like if I was fishing the Blackfoot on a normal year, or parts of the lower Yellowstone, like I would not be afraid to go giant. But a lot of what I'm doing, it seems like the 6 to 8 is really the deal. When you go down to, it seems like you kind of reach a point of diminishing returns when you start getting up into the 9, 10-inch range, where you're not moving that many more big fish to justify having the bigger fly out there. So we're doing our simple little mono connection, which you've seen a lot, not a big deal. We're just going to kind of get that mono in. You don't have to really worry about how well that's in there. This fly will end up in the tree before anything else happens. And you have no hook back there, so there's really no concern on it. I'm going to put in a little Palmer chenille. This happens to be tan. You know, you can mix it up. I use a lot of the pearl for this. And this is the extent of the flash I'm going to use on this fly. That when you're tying the shank, you know, if you want to have some flash out the back, that's fine. I typically don't. I think I've seen enough stuff chasing big fish that, especially in Arkansas, and some of that gin clear water where it's highly pressured, that I think I do better with less flash than more flash. I actually had a fish I was guiding a couple of years ago. Michael Saladin had some clients in the boat, and I had a couple other clients in the boat, and we were making this one pass we'd made a couple of times, caught some fish, and I told Michael, you know, hey, those fish are out there. You know, prior to this, my client says, hey, I'm going to try this gray and white thing. I'm like, oof, I don't know, man. Got a lot of flash on it. He's like, I want to try it. I'm like, all right, whatever, go for it. So he runs his olive and or his white and gray thing through there, and we get some smaller fish, blah, blah, blah. And Michael comes behind us after, I think we'd made 3 passes through that run. And his client, Mr. Dan, puts a big gray and white on with 0 flash and got a giant fish behind him. I think it was a 27-inch male. Sweet looking fish. Just awesome. Now, was it just the fly? I don't know. But it was a good point that I could tell my client, hey, did you hear what he said? Do you hear that, you know, he said it was a big gray and white one with very little flash? And of course, my client, who's a good friend of mine, was like, yeah, I heard that. So I found a little humor in that. I'm not sure how humored he was with the fact. But of course, my client had been coming down there for a lot of years, and it was Dan's first day on the white. And sometimes that happens. So now I'm taking 2 pieces of feather here to finish off this head. Real simple. Just tying it in. Tips first, because you want that bigger bulk closer to the eye of the hook. Once again, yellow schlop and whatever. These are some rooster saddle feathers. So we're going to just kind of, you know, I always kind of pick at them to make sure I'm not wrapping them down while I'm wrapping them in. And I'm giving myself quite a bit of the hook shank. I probably left, you know, a quarter of the hook shank to do this. I used to tie these with bucktail up here. You know, I didn't really notice much. I didn't really notice any advantages to using the bucktail on it. So I just noticed it was heavier and it would kind of wear you out a little bit more on the cast. So I kind of just went to the feathers. I do 2 because, well, it's pretty. It's definitely not necessary, but it does look pretty good, I gotta say. Once again, I'm not sure that the fish care, but what the hell. And we're just going to get that stuff in. And then I am going to wrap the thread back a little bit over that, and that'll kind of help. Seems to me it kind of helps it from breaking and popping. So I usually give myself a little bit more room at the eye, but whatever, we'll just kind of finish it off. And I'm just using 6/0 thread on these, on the rear parts of these flies, because it's nice to have the smaller diameter thread just on this, and it's not like you're really pushing any heavy or thick materials in there that require thicker thread. As we switch to the bucktail on the front hook, that's where I will switch to, you know, the Flymaster Plus 210. And I always get out, these wet finishes, I kind of, whatever, we'll make it work. There's 3 wet finishes, should be plenty. Sally Hansen's. On all of these, that's kind of like the last thing you want, is that thread to explode and give you a little bit more of a headache. But I've been known to lose some back feathers and just add them on. So that's the back half. Super simple, kind of the way I like to tie them. Not much resistance there, super easy to cast, no big deal. So the other thing you can do is, you know, you can tie these back halves up and have them stashed and then kind of finish off the fly as needed depending on your situation. Like if you're going to some river that you haven't been to, you can always decide, well, I need a unweighted or I need a weighted, whatever. Gives you a couple options. So as we go to this fish skull deceiver, I'm using the 2-aught Gamakatsu round bend hook. It's a plastic worm hook, hence the little hook keepers on the front. This thing's a bad hook. It works good, light wire, but very effective. It's a trout grabbing, get 'em bait or get 'em hook. Now there's some other couple of hooks out there you can use, which would be like the Aberdeen Predator by Ahrex. These are J hooks, so it's just nothing fancy to it. Big gap, long shank, but a wide enough gap. You know, a lot of the flies you see are tied with narrow gaps, and I really just dislike that if I think I'm going to hook big fish. I've just lost too many on the old school standard trout hooks, but I've really switched to something with a little bigger gap. Super simple connection, boom, back half the fly, takes about no time, so that's a good thing. And get your distance right. Looks about right. There it is, right about there. And these go quick. So what we're gonna do is just on this fly versus the brush head one, you can kind of wrap your body material a little further up. Once again, I'm doubling up on that mono as I come back to it. It just feels like it gets a little better grab, but I still don't know if that's necessary. Then we're going to get our small Palmer chenille. This happens to be tan. Whatever, probably doesn't matter, but it's what I have. The only time I really think about it is like when I'm sending flies out for production. You know, it's one of those things where it's like you might as well make them look as good as you can, because at that point you're selling to fishermen, not necessarily fish. So, you know, we got to do that, because believe it or not, these videos don't make you any money. You know, doesn't really even get you many guide trips, so whatever. Well, it's just something to do. Keeps me busy, gives me purpose. And it is officially 90 degrees outside. There's not a puff of wind. So motivation is somewhat lacking right now to do anything else. And I'm just kind of trying to twist that material. Well, I was, and then it went haywire, but it doesn't matter. You just pull it back and it'll keep going the way you want it anyway. So like with the brush head deceiver and the skull head deceiver, it gives me two different baits to fish differently. A lot of people like to sit there and trash, you know, lead about, oh, it doesn't work, whatever. And then you go out west and nobody fishes anything else, it almost seems like. Now there's a pace of current and a type of structure where, you know, sometimes it's nice to have lead. There's also an attitude that those fish get. Like, man, there's times where it's not necessarily about having that fly super deep, but boy, it's about having that fly turn its head down to go back down. You know, if a fish raises up and looks at it, I see them do it so much with unweighted flies. Like, you know, they come up and look, but it's just not there to encourage them enough to get after it. And a lot of times in those situations, I'd like having a little bit of lead, because it'll just get them. When that bait falls back towards their head, they really, it'll trigger them to bite. So, I mean, I know people, the swim fly thing is great fun, and everybody likes watching the swim fly go, but man, there's a time and a place. And I've got, you know, I've got clients who really stick with the swim too, and I don't know, it works good. It does work good. But there's sometimes in certain structure, especially, like you start getting into deeper, faster runs, and it seems like that's where the fish are less likely to really jump up unless they're ultra fired up. And that's when just having a fly that can tip back head down towards them they'll get after it. And like a lot of your Western fishing, you know, fishing that faster pace, you know, you want something that penetrates that water column. So the first thing I'm going to do is tie in just a little bit of olive. Once again, lining up those tips so they're about right where the feather is on the back hook. We're just going to kind of jam some of this in. I went really light on this front because I'm going to put in a little bit of peacock. I don't know. That might just be from something I did a million years ago that I still do. And so typically what I do is I will add just a little bit of olive to start. And I'll go in and add my little bit of peacock. You know, you kind of look at it and hope that it's covering up like both sides of the hook. About halfway down, and then dig out your yellow buck hair, and then you're going to go a little thicker on this because your yellow you're only going to do one chunk, and it's so I do about the full amount that I'm going to use versus, you know, kind of half and half when I'm doing the other. And pull out all that short bucktail, man. It just gives you way more bulk and really doesn't provide you anything. So, you know, learning how to manipulate materials with your hands and getting them how you want them is a big part to tying a good fly. You start adding more materials than you need, and it's trash. Keep it simple. Try to keep it as little as possible. So there's my yellow we're going to add, you know, kind of just measure it up. Try to keep it all, you know, same distances. This is a little hollower bucktail, but, you know, with those skulls, when you jam them on there, they tend to kind of condense everything down, so that'll be fine. Notice I do kind of separate that head, do it with deer hair heads, do it with whatever. Seems like that really will help you lock your product or your materials into place a lot better than just kind of wrapping it in there. And just kind of trim it up. I'm not worried about keeping this super clean because I'm jamming a skull over it. So I want to make sure that it's tapered down enough that that skull will go on it. And that'll also help control these bucktail feathers that are down. When we do there we go. Yep, that should be about right. Grab a little peacock, throw that in there. This probably really doesn't matter at all, but whatever. Sometimes I pretend it does. No, but peacock does look good. And we'll grab a little bit more olive bucktail. About the same amount I used to start. On the first little chunk, once again, getting all the little fluff and short bucktails out. Evening the tips with my fingers, trying to make them not perfect, but, you know, within reason. I'm not into the stacking of them. It kind of makes it look artificially perfect. Whatever, there's good. Lay this right on top again. See, and this is kind of on the bottom of the bucktail, so it is pretty hollow, so it's flaring quite a bit. But, you know, like I mentioned, that skull will help control it all. Wrangle it in, and if that doesn't, a week in your fly box will surely wrangle it in. And then I don't really care what this looks like because it's just, I kind of tie it all in to get a nice base to jam my skull head on. And then I go ahead and get out the gel control Loctite. Awesome product. Makes a lot less mess than some of the other stuff. Zappy Gap still works, but it seems like this dispensing head on this allows me to go through a lot less. I'll pull out one of my fish skull heads. When I'm tying this size with a #1 in the back and a 1/0 in the front, or 2/0, pardon me, I will use the, I think that's the medium skull head. And then I use the small mediums on my other ones. I do not go any bigger than medium. The larges will kill you if you're not careful. And we're just gonna get a bunch of glue on there. Bunch of glue, bunch of glue. There we go, look at that. And then we grab our skull helmet and cram that thing on there. And if you are using some random hooks to like check to make sure that that skull will fit over that eye before you know, tie a whole fly and figure out that it won't work. That's kind of it right there. So that'll end up seizing up on that and being good. But what I do is usually, you know, get a whip finish or two in front. It's just kind of locks that head on there better. And then you can go in and put the eyes on it if you want. You know, they give you a bunch of eyes to use. I don't use them because, well, whatever. If they fall off before you, they'll fall off just casting, and it takes an extra few minutes to put them on there, so I don't even care. I don't even care. It doesn't matter. Them fish don't care. It doesn't matter at all. So there it is. And there's the fish skull bait fish. You know, that's about a 7-incher. Good fly. That thing is, it's good to have in your box, man. And those are, you know, those two, that fly and that brush head with the same back end, catch a lot of fish just running those two baits. So keep it simple. Make sure you got more and don't spend your whole life tying away. But that's the deal. Hope you guys like that video. Thanks.